Is this Nikon Coolpix A900 a DSLR killer? Well, that may not have been the first phrase that came to your mind when I said Coolpix. However, this camera does take some fantastic photos, and we're gonna talk all about the pros, the cons, and why this camera really surprised me in this video. So let's hop right into this review. This is the Nikon Coolpix A900, and this is a cool little compact digital camera. When this camera was released in 2016, it was available in black, like I have here, and a kind of cool silver, had that retro look to it. Again, 2016, meaning that in 2024, when I'm making this video, this camera is about 8 years old, so not the newest camera. However, it is a 20 megapixel sensor, which I find phenomenal. It's a tiny sensor, but 20 megapixels nonetheless. It is a 1/2.3 inch sensor, meaning it's about 0.4 inches, less than a half inch. So yes, tiny sensor. And we have a 35x zoom on this camera. Now, looking at the outside of this camera, it is pretty compact, pretty small, pretty thin, can slide right in your pocket. It weighs under 300 grams. I believe it's about 289 grams, so a little more than your cell phone, but this has some really cool features on it. One of them being I can flip this up and I can take some down low shots. I can even flip this all the way over and vlog with this if I want to. This is a cool little vlog camera, and we'll talk about some of the video capabilities later. But again, I can flip this up and see myself. I can't do that with a lot of DSLRs, which is cool about this camera. I can also flip this down so I can take those Hail Mary shots when I'm shooting up above my head. So this is a pretty neat little camera. Let's talk about the specs of the lens as well. So this is a 4.3 to a 151 millimeter lens, and because it's a tiny sensor, it's a crop sensor, that comes out to a 24 to an 840 millimeter 135 millimeter equivalent, an 800 millimeter lens in this tiny compact digital camera. That is so cool, and it blows my mind. I love that I can have this 800 millimeter lens in my pocket, and then when I'm done, I can just put it away. The lens cover closes, and I can just slide it in my pocket. So being a compact digital camera, you may be wondering, what features is this lacking? What can I do with this camera? Well, it has a few different modes. It has your standard manual, auto, shutter priority, program mode, aperture priority, and some other little video recording modes on here. Again, I can shoot in full manual if I want to. I can set my ISO, I can change my aperture, and I can change my shutter speed all while shooting. So if you're a pro and you just want to go full manual, or if you're a beginner and you want to learn full manual, that's absolutely an option on this camera, and that's not available on all compact cameras. So thank you to Nikon for putting in all of those manual controls into this little compact camera. Now, what I like to do, because this camera does have an ISO range from 80 to 3200, or there's options for ISO ranges. So it's kind of like an auto range. Your camera will adjust your ISO automatically, but you can lock it into a fixed range. I personally use the 80 to 400 ISO range. That seems to give me a little bit of wiggle room without letting that ISO go way too high and making my image mushy or grainy. Again, very small sensor, so you have to be careful with your ISO ranges on this. So let's talk a little bit about this variable aperture lens. It's something that you kind of have to get used to. On the less expensive lenses, you will know out there with your DSLRs, they will have a variable aperture, meaning that when you are at your widest focal length, your aperture will also be at its widest, and as you begin to zoom, it lets less light into the lens and your focal length will narrow down a little bit, letting even less light into your lens. Now, again, this is a 24 millimeter equivalent to about an 800 millimeter equivalent. So at 24 millimeters, I will have an aperture value of about 3.5 unless I decide to close it down. And when I zoom all the way in using that 800 millimeter, I will be down to an f-stop of closer to like 6.9 or f7. And again, this has a full aperture range of 3.4 to f8. So even if I'm at my widest focal length, I can still close down my aperture to f8 if I would like to. However, if I am at my longest focal length of 800 plus millimeters, I will only be able to open up my aperture to f6.9 because again, that variable aperture is just something we have to deal with lower end lenses. However, I am really impressed with the photo quality of this, and we will get into that in the photo section in just a second. The battery life in the A900 lasts right around 270 to 300 photos, and if you're shooting HD video, it lasts about 70 minutes according to Nikon. I found that to be a little bit less, especially because I'm typically shooting a mixture of photo and video. The A900 takes Canon EL12 batteries right here in this bottom slot right here, and that's also where your SD card goes. This little A900 takes SD cards, and I have plenty of those laying around, which is fantastic. And looking around this camera, let's not forget it does have that 920,000 dot 3-inch LCD on the back, which I can tilt and move however I want to. I can look at it as a vlogger, and I can do my Hail Mary shots. I can do my down low worm's eye perspective shots, bird's eye perspective shots, and then close it in. And lastly, we have this nice rubber gripping for my thumb. I have it on front here as well. I have my little shutter speed ring that I can change with my thumb, my aperture ring back here that I can also change with my thumb, and we have our shutter button here, and then our flash just pops out on top here. I love that this has a built-in flash. So let's talk about the actual photos, because I'm sure you're dying to see photos from this camera, which I will have throughout this video. And don't forget, you can see the full resolution photos on my website at therunandgun.com. I also want to add that this camera does have Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, so it's compatible with the Nikon SnapBridge app on your phone, which I think is awesome of Nikon to include. When the Nikon Coolpix A900 was released, the MSRP was about $399 US. So for a compact digital camera, I am impressed by the A900. Again, for a Coolpix camera, I was blown away by the quality of images. I recently took this on a Tennessee hiking trip, and I wanted to try some long exposures of waterfalls, and yes, I will have some previews of those with the settings. And again, I was just blown away by the fact that with a little compact camera, I could get such good quality photos out of this thing. It also has a macro mode, which allows you to focus very close and get some really, really sharp macro shots. I also want to reiterate the fact that this has an 800 millimeter equivalent lens with it, which still blows my mind. This thing is just a sniper. I can really reach out, and I was taking pictures of rocks and buildings that were 50 or 100 yards away and really getting nice, tight, crisp, sharp shots. If I were to try that with a DSLR, I would need a massive 400 to 800 millimeter lens, and that just isn't something that's going to fit in my pocket like this Coolpix camera. When it comes to video, the Coolpix A900 does shoot 4K. Is it mind-blowing? Not necessarily. We'll get into that in just a second. But again, 4K for vlogging or blogging is fantastic. Again, I can just flip up this little screen and I can see myself as I vlog, which is awesome. I think it's especially great for close-up shots, vlogging, and those tight shots. If you really want to reach out and capture something super far away, you're not going to be able to do that with the camera on your phone. So having this optical zoom pairing with that 4K video is really awesome. And for an 8-year-old camera, I will say I am impressed by the video quality. So let's say you want to vlog with this camera. I just turn it on, I flip this over so I can now see myself. So now I am vlogging from the Nikon A900, and it does a pretty darn good quality video. It looks good. The only downside again is when I zoom in, yeah, we kind of go out of focus a little bit there when I zoom in. So let's go ahead, we'll zoom out. Now, one of the slightly frustrating things with this is the inability to lock in your exposure when you're taking video. If that is possible, I definitely haven't figured it out yet. So if I were to go to a darker point of my studio, you can see the exposure brightens up. And if I were to go by a very bright window, you can see the background gets a little bit darker. So that's how you'll have to deal with things if you want to use this camera for vlogging. When it comes to frame rates, the A900 shoots 4K at 25 and 30 frames per second, and you can shoot full HD 1920 by 1080 at 60 frames per second for a little bit of slow-mo. Now, as much as I love this little Coolpix A900 camera, there are some downsides. This has a very, very tiny sensor, so when we compare it to things like a DSLR with an APS-C or a full-frame sensor, you're not going to get the same low-light performance out of this compact camera. You're also not going to be able to carry those massive lenses, so it does have its pros and cons and things to think about when you're selecting a camera. Again, small sensor, the quality of the photos is not going to be any better than a DSLR, but it will be much better than, for example, your iPhone camera because it does have a bigger sensor than your iPhone. You can do some low light photography with this with long exposures. However, again, you really have to limit that ISO, or high ISO values are going to get you some mushy looking low light photography. One thing that I did find was missing, for example, on a Canon G12, one of those model cameras, they do have a hot shoe. This does not have a hot shoe, which would be very helpful for a little mic. There's no mic input on this either, which would be awesome to make this like the perfect little vlogging camera. That's not existent on here. Also, it's good to know that if you are vlogging and recording video, it will chew through your battery pretty quickly. One of the last downsides is that once your focus is locked in and you start recording video, you can't autofocus while you're recording video, and your focus can't update even if you try and half press the focus or shutter button. Your focus is stuck until you stop recording, but you'll have to focus, record, stop recording, reset your focus, and then record again if you wish to change focus. So here are my final thoughts on the Nikon Coolpix A900 compact digital camera. This is a really cool camera. It takes some great quality photo. I love that it can shoot 4K video if you need it to. Not the best looking video. I wouldn't compare it to a DSLR. It's about on par with a phone. However, this lens on here is just awesome. The reach of an 800mm lens in your pocket is still wild to me. There are a lot of cool features on this, and it's missing some features, but you also have to keep in mind this is a compact camera that is 8 years old. Is it a good buy today? Absolutely. You can find it for about $350 US on Amazon. You can find it used for about $200. I think I paid about $200 for this if you want to look on eBay or Facebook Marketplace. It does have some pros and some cons. It does have a tiny sensor. It struggles in low light just a little bit, but if you're shooting out in daylight in full sun and you have plenty of light, this camera really shines and you can get some really awesome photos with it. Now you might be saying, well, for $200, I can pick up a used DSLR. You can, absolutely, but then you're gonna need to pick up a lens, and now you have this giant kit that weighs a lot. This is for someone who is looking for a little something to take with them, maybe hiking, maybe to do a little traveling, street photography. I actually use my A900 as an EDC camera, or an everyday carry camera. I just have this in my pocket every day for those once-in-a-lifetime opportunities where you say, oh, I wish I had a camera. Maybe your phone can't reach as far as you wanted it to, and there's always the saying, the best camera is the one you have with you. Well, why not take a pretty good one and have a good camera with you that takes some decent quality photos that's better than your phone. So again, there are some pros, there are some cons. It'll ultimately be up to you to decide if this Nikon Coolpix A900 camera is up to you. But personally, I am a huge fan, and you're gonna see more cameras like this on my channel, whether it's point and shoots, compact digital cameras, or even older DSLRs that may be more affordable than the current flagships and expensive cameras that are available. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Also, if you get the chance, be sure to subscribe to my channel, because only about 3% of the people that see my videos are actually subscribed. So if you'd like to see more of my content, hit that subscribe button down below. Be sure to give me a like and drop me a comment, even if you just want to say hi or give me your favorite compact digital camera in the comments down below. So until next time, get out and go shoot.